last council meeting. See, that was me last council meeting.
Oh, really?
Do either of you have admin
Yeah.
reports?
Yeah, it's like only on this
Sam.
side.
Yeah, but we're not 16. We were 12.
What area is that here?
Yeah, exactly. 37 is a 10 by 12.
Oh, it's really.
Gosh, I'm sitting there looking at this like, oh my gosh.
That was me. Go back to the car.
I don't need them to read those.
Oh, well.
I do have some magnifiers to read those. 1.5 really helps.
That snazzy purple set in the car.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, look your best, man.
Hey, I have no shame. If that's what I needed, that's what I needed, but I think I
Look your
can
best face.
hobble along. Yeah.
You'll just hold it out a little bit. Right?
Blind.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a mountain time zone person with us this evening. Hello, mountain time person.
Hello. Yeah, it took me a while to realize I'm an hour later.
We'll do our best to get you out of there as quickly as we can.
Sounds good.
Hey, you know where this is? Well, never mind. Hold on.
It came back.
I shut it off.
Well, look at the time. It's 6 o'clock, and so Ms. Hayes, we're rolling with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we have a study session from Clark County regarding the Waste Connections Recycling Agreement. And with that, I will turn it over to Public Works Director, Mark Hersick.
I'm actually going to turn it over to Travis Dutton. He works for Clark County Public Health, and he's the Solid Waste Program Manager. Go ahead, Travis.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you this evening about our residential recycling contract. We've got a couple of slides that I'm going to put up. I'm assuming I'm going to be able to share my screen, but I'll get that running. But like Mark mentioned, my name is Travis Dutton. I am with Clark County Solid Waste Program. And let me go ahead and pause real quick and I'll go through some introductions for some other folks in the room. All right, and I also will rely on Mark. I'm going to ask you, just in case there's any formalities or expectations in how these meetings are run, just, let me know if I do anything out of tradition. But we've got a couple of slides, go through some introductions, and then was going to propose that we take some time for questions throughout, and then again at the end. And since I have both of my screens dedicated to this presentation, Mark or somebody else, if I might elicit some help in any hands that might be up. The Battleground City Council is very, very tiny on my screen, so I will definitely miss any hands that go up. So just looking for some assistance there. So we are here to talk to you about the residential recycling collection contract We are currently approaching the end of one contract and are approaching the beginning of a new contract with negotiated terms. And so we wanted to accomplish two things today. One was to provide you with an overview of how residential recycling is contracted for and managed in Clark County, summarize the services that the current contract provides, summarize the updated terms for the new contract and a timeline for that new contract, answer questions and gather input and feedback. And then at this meeting or at a future meeting, goal number 2 would be to gain support from Battleground City Council to support moving forward with this contract and to begin to prepare for an interlocal process, an interlocal agreement process, which we'll go over here in a moment. So, and real quick, I wanted to introduce the folks that we have with us. Just to give you a full spectrum of knowledge, we've brought 2 of our solid waste senior operations specialists. So we have Molly Mangarich and Mike Davis with Clark County. And then from the Waste Connection side, the service provider, we have Derek Ranta and Cindy Holloway. I wanted just to make sure, Derek and Cindy, would you both provide your titles? I always get them mixed up, and I think it would be best for them to hear from you your titles accurately.
Sure, I'm Derek Ranta. I'm the district manager for Waste Connections of Washington in Clark County.
And I am Cindy Holloway, the Governmental and Community Affairs Director.
So across this group of people, we should have any amount of wisdom that you wanted to get from us this evening. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. So on my next slide, I'm going to go into what the contracts provide and some more details, but I wanted to give some brief background. The current contract for residential recycling services began in 2008, and it was set to expire on December 31st of 2021. We began contract negotiations and identifying improvements to the contract with ample time, but due to COVID, our staff being physically located in public health and the impact of some of the response measures, as well as staff turnover and the adjustments, we got a little bit behind. So we are currently operating under a 6-month extension so that we could do our due diligence on stakeholder and partner engagement, this meeting being one of those appointments. And then also to date, I wanted to give you some background on the stakeholder engagement we have done. We have 2 committees that provide advisory capacity and input. We have the Solid Waste Advisory Commission, which is made up of various customer groups throughout the county, both geographically related to residents and then commercial and industry and farming and agriculture as well. So we have a group that we run a lot of our decisions and a lot of our projects through to provide initial advisory capacity. And we also have the lengthily titled Regional Solid Waste System Steering Committee. This is a committee made up of all of the public works directors that sign on to any of our services or are part of our system in the county, of which your public works director, Mark, is a member. So with the feedback that we got from those groups and our internal staff feedback, we agreed and worked with Waste Connections on a new contract with new updated terms and agreements. And our goal is to have this new contract in place prior to, but no later than July 1st of 2022. Just so we can paint a picture of where Battleground fits into our overall system. Battleground receives residential recycling services provided by this contract through an interlocal agreement. We are currently operating under an interlocal agreement, which continues until a new contract is signed. And again, if there are questions, go ahead and chime in again, because I can't see, not that you have tiny hands, but on my screen, they are tiny hands. So the residential recycling contracts, the roles within the county that are dictated by the state are the Clark County takes the lead on providing certain services for the unincorporated areas of the county and any cities that decide to sign on for any of those services through interlocal agreements. So our role as county is to procure the services, so providing the legal the legal resources, the administrative resources to go through a procurement process, contract negotiation, and then we also manage all elements of the contract. The county also provides countywide outreach and education as well, and the time dedicated to manage all of those services. So Molly and Mike, the two senior operations specialists that we have here today, both have a role in managing this and other contracts, providing solid waste services throughout the county. The cities that have interlocal agreements with the county for this contract are Battleground, La Center, and Yakult. The benefits of signing on with an interlocal agreement is the reduced administrative burden. All of the things we mentioned in that first column fall on the county to do, to provide those services, to manage state resources, and ensure that we have the service that we need. So cities are still able to participate and provide input through the steering committee that I mentioned Mark is a part of, that meets twice annually, and then as needed related to solid waste issues that pop up. There are a few cities that contract directly with Waste Connections for residential recycling services. Those are Camas, Washougal, Ridgefield, and Vancouver. Historically, these are due to the fact that there used to be multiple service providers that have since been purchased by Waste Connections and the contracts transitioned. In other places such as Camas and Vancouver, either their size or their the structure. So Camas hauls their own garbage. They have municipal solid waste garbage service. And so having recycling that complements the service that the city provides makes more sense for them. However, all of these cities, Camas, Washougal, Ridgefield, and Vancouver, also have an interlocal with the county that ensures that their recyclable materials are processed with the rest of the county's material so that we can achieve efficiencies in volume and we don't have material leaving and going to lots of different places. It provides the best cost and efficient service to the entirety of the county if all of our recyclable materials go to the facilities that are located within the county. I'm going to pause for a second before I jump on just to make sure. And Derek or Mike or Molly or Cindy, please chime in if there's anything that I missed. We've been preparing for this, so I may skip over something. So, all right. So rather than spend this whole hour reading you the entirety of that contract, we've put together a brief list of what services this current recycling contract provides. So this current residential recycling contract provides curbside collection of recyclable materials from single family and multifamily residences. The contract is for the unincorporated areas of Clark County, and then through the interlocals, that service is then provided to the cities that have signed on. Service is currently provided weekly in urban areas and every other week in rural areas of the county. Waste Connections staff, Waste Connections has a certain number of FTE that are dedicated to outreach and education, and those educators work in tandem with the city of Vancouver and Clark County to set expectations for outreach, education, and other marketing strategies. And we all work together to make sure that the consistent messaging and efficient outreach and education is happening consistently across the county. This list also establishes the list of materials that must be collected through curbside service and can only be adjusted under certain circumstances. So we refer to those as program materials, and what you see show up on your newsletter directing you to put certain items into your recycling curbside commingled container and other materials either into the garbage or to other places in the system to be recycled or disposed of. And that list has, this contract provides the requirements under which that list is, we can allow a change. It also sets customer service expectations, including the expectation to maintain local and effective customer service rather than utilizing a distant call center. This contract also establishes equipment expectations. So in the contract that we're operating under, at the beginning of this contract, we were under a 3-bin system. So this provided new equipment in order to allow for the shift to a commingled system with new carts, truck body types, and it also designated truck fuel types to run on cleaner more efficient styles of fuel for their trucks throughout the county. And then the last thing is that to remove a cost as a barrier for recycling at county buildings, the current contract provides free recycling services to Clark County facilities, and that includes parks as well. Derek, Mike, or anybody, anything you wanted to add there? Are there any questions about what the current contract provides? All right, not hearing you two. Oh,
Mr. Dutton,
yes,
if we'll take just a moment, I think there's a question or two, and then there'll be quite a few probably at the end.
great, thank you.
Go ahead.
So according to this, it says curbside collection is for single family and multifamily residents. Who does the businesses? And are businesses not included in this contract?
Businesses are not included in this contract. Business recycling, commercial recycling is handled a little differently in the state. And I think that answer is probably best served by Derek. Do you want to talk about your approach with the commercial recycling?
Yeah, commercial recycling is in the state of Washington is technically an open market, so businesses can contract with anybody they choose to hire.
Okay.
We do have a memorandum of agreement for schools with Waste Connections. That's again, in order to provide an ease into establishing recycling programs at schools. There is an agreed upon price reduction that is not really part of this contract nor any contract. It's I think it just became a memorandum of agreement that Waste Connections will provide services at a reduced cost to schools who participate in recycling services within the system.
Yeah, I had a question on the last slide, the free collection recyclables from Clark County facilities. Does that extend to the cities with interlocals as well?
Well, it doesn't now, but if you're excited about that potential, my next slide's probably going to make you pretty pleased.
Thank you.
I probably should take a more serious approach. It does not currently under the contract, but we have updated that to include cities that sign on via interlocals. So
I believe that's it for now, Mr. Dutton, if you want to continue on.
all right, thank you. I've got 5 updates to the recycling contract that I wanted to go through. And one thing I just wanted to highlight, because I know it's a big question for us, and I know it's a big question for our ratepayers, is across the bottom, you'll see that I finally figured out how to put a piggy bank on here, and that the updates that we're discussing and that we're proposing here will take place under the current rate structure and will not have any cost increases to the residents or any customers of the system. So all of the updates that we'll be talking about of the contract improvements will exist under the current rate structure, and no increases will happen as a result of these. We do have annual CPI increases for inflation that are based upon a performance and are based upon a calculation that we update annually. But those are completely separate from any of the updates that we would be providing in the current, in this updated contract. So I just wanted to highlight that real quick, that banner across the bottom refers to all 5 of the updates that we're going to be talking about, the main updates in our contract. So first update, customers who subscribe to the recycling service will go from weekly to every other week collection of their recyclables, and will have the option to adjust the size of their provided carts to meet their needs. Customers will also, this will be rolled out with automated garbage service. So customers will also receive program provided carts for garbage. And to look down at the benefit, as our county grows, as we continue to add more homes to routes, the opportunity to go to every other week collection of recyclables and line this up with the rest of the, really to have this throughout the county, will add to much more efficient routes so that we can maintain current costs, but also it'll reduce the impact to roads and air quality with fewer trucks traveling on and impacting locally maintained roads and contributing to air quality issues. The solid waste system's impact on air quality and road maintenance will be reduced. I wanted to stop. If there are questions, I assume you can start chatting, but I'm going to keep going through these updates and at the end of the slide. But every other week collection is going to be a big one. And Derek, I wanted to highlight real quick, Derek had talked a little bit about, this is going to come with a very large outreach and education push. I think the idea of shifting to a potentially new collection schedule, going from weekly to every other week with new garbage bins and a slightly different way to engage with the system is going to be requiring quite a bit of outreach and education, focused on the areas that are changing to this level of service. But I think, Derek, your question that we talked about earlier was, we would also want to know what Battleground City Council's expectations are related to communicating updates related to the project or our approach to the project. Derek, was there something else you wanted to add?
No,
there?
I mean, I think we were going to mention at this point that we are planning on adding a roll cart service, so an automated service to Battleground at the same time that these changes were made. So there'll be a lot of changes in the solid waste system in Battleground. We just want to make sure the council was comfortable with the changes, knowing that you could get questions on it and that you felt educated about it. So we didn't know if there was a time in the future you wanted us to come back and discuss that. But essentially every customer that's on our system, which is about 6,000 homes right now in Battleground, will be getting a automated cart versus the old customer owned can. It'll be a company owned cart that they can they'll be supplied with for free.
I have a question real quick. So when you say we're going to go to every other week for recyclables, maybe I'm the only one that has this issue. I have this issue with my yard bin of like, was it this week? Was it next week? Did I get it out? Did I not get it out? And yard bin's a little bit different because, you know, I just don't mow the lawn then. But do we think, I mean, I think of every other week and I think of like the families that we have out here, how many people are using their recycle bins and what size of bin are you going to have to keep people recycling on an every other week? I only have 3 of us in our house and our recycle bin's pretty full every week. And I have one of the bigger ones. So how are you guys planning on doing that?
I can answer that one, Travis. So the carts, customers would be afforded the opportunity for free to upgrade to a 95-gallon cart. It's a larger cart. We use that in the city of Vancouver and all of our other every other week service areas. And it seems to work well in those service areas. I know it's going from a 64 to a 96, so it seems like it shouldn't. But from what we've experienced, it actually works pretty well on an every other week system.
And I would also, just to that first point, I think you'd mentioned, like, when does it go out? When does it not go out? You know, living in Washougal myself, you know, just keeping that schedule posted, I think that's going to be part of our big outreach and education. We have a lot of tools that will be available for folks, and a lot of resources that we will be providing, as well as thorough communication, and can help people figure out which day is which. But I know after a few weeks in Washougal, just the adjustment and the adaptation to going to every other week, you know, having that schedule handy, you know, I guess I'm not telling you that the whole thing will be solved by posting a calendar next to your garbage can, but I think just emphasizing that we will need to hear from council and from residents what type of outreach and education is going to be necessary so that we can overcome those hurdles. And we've also looked at a lot of other places that have shifted from weekly to every other week, and learned from some of their, you know, we will be working to learn from some of their lessons learned, some of their successes. But really, it's going to be a big push to make sure that everybody's aware of it. And it's going to fall on our outreach and education staff to do that, and good communication with the councils and any resources that exist with any of the cities. So it would be, right now, since Washougal is already on every other week recycling service, it would be a switch for Battleground and Yakult. And then that would be, I believe everybody in the county would then be on every other week recycling service, consistent throughout.
Yeah, and we'll send out we send out mailers or calendars every year for every other week services, so people can remember or put it up so they know which week is garbage, which week is recycling, which week is yard debris. Because this is basically what you'll have is you'll have rotating yard debris and recycling. That'll be the intent on this, so that you're putting 2 carts out every week. And we'll make sure everybody has that calendar. We also have a Recollect app that is a calendaring system that you can sign up for. You plug in your address and it will notify you via an email, or you can go into the website and look and see which service is being set out on that particular day or week. And it's a nice reminder. I use it. It's a good reminder. I wouldn't be able to keep track otherwise. So
I have a question about service cancellations due to weather. So does that mean it's going to be a month before recycling would be picked up if that week's recycling were canceled due to weather?
on every other week services, that oftentimes is what it depends on the situation. If it's a 1-day cancellation, then we push everything out 1 day and then collect the following day. If it's multiple days, then yes, it does go to a situation where they have to wait. You would have to wait till your next service date, which would be in 2 weeks. So it wouldn't be a full month. It would be 2 weeks until they got it again.
It would be 2 weeks. Okay. Yeah, that's.
And we also, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we also offer people, in extreme situations, if they need to get into the transfer stations or other situations, we try and accommodate them as much as possible. So.
Okay. I'm just thinking of right around Christmas time when everybody has all those boxes that they need to get rid of. And we also have weather issues around that time. And it's seems like a lot of time to wait. So
yeah. It's a challenge. It happened this year. It happens every year. It happened this year in the rural parts of Clark County. We basically canceled most recycling and most services in general. There was about a week period where we had that poor weather, and so everybody had to wait another week following that. And the reason for it also is that the county has just become so large anymore. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we could bring in additional resources and catch up, but we just we can't bring in 30 trucks and 30 drivers to catch up all the services that need to be caught up in the following week. So we have to respect the next service day, which is the other week.
okay, thank you.
I just wanted a quick clarification. You said the larger cart was 95 gallons, replacing the 64 gallon. Did I hear correctly that that's no charge to upgrade that?
Correct. And if somebody wants, if they need 2 64s or something along those lines, I believe we do that for the flat price as well. So there are options to get people the amount of service that they need. But what we found is that 95 is actually, it works okay. It's a big cart, but it's worked okay in every other week services. And even in the city of Vancouver, we have a lot of alleys and different situations. It's worked out okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you. I was always under the impression that the cost that we paid was for the pickup service. So when I'm looking at the no additional cost to ratepayers, I'm thinking, well, of course not. Now there's less pickups. So I don't know if that's what the cost is, but I'm curious to know how this biweekly is better for us.
The cost that is paid for recycling service includes everything up to the point of processing those materials. So it's not just the pickup, but it's also the delivery of the materials. And I'll have Derek go through a little bit more of that. So when we're talking about all of these updates, that no additional cost to ratepayers addresses all of those. So not just the shift to every other week service, but also the other some of the other highlights we're going to talk about. So I think just preventing future costs, getting the system in line so that we can plan and achieve with everybody doing the same thing, having the same levels of service is our goal here, so that we can start to plan for future growth and make sure that the cities have consistent service moving forward. And Derek, can you break out a little bit more that cost piece to answer that portion of the question a little bit?
Yeah, it's, when we talked to the team at Clark County and they suggested they want to go to every other week service, we, kind of go back and build a model to see what price level would it be at. And I don't have the numbers on it, but if we were to continue in a weekly system such as this and rebid or reprice the model, I have a feeling the prices would go up quite a bit. Just because of the cost of equipment has skyrocketed over the years, the cost of labor, obviously, and the value of recycling commodities is close to negative at this point. So I think that this actually, while there's no increased cost to taxpayers, it actually prevents a potentially large increase in cost for recycling services going forward. I don't have that number, and I'm saying that without having to run the numbers on that, but I think that's one of the reasons it comes out as an even situation.
And I would say that our goal here in recommending that is we are recommending an every other week service model that is successful throughout most of the county, and are identifying other improvements that need to be made without increasing the cost to the ratepayers. So I do completely understand that what this looks like is a reduction in service, and we're saying that it's a free reduction in service for you, the ratepayer. But what we are trying to accomplish is a system where we can maintain those costs, makes the system as efficient as possible, and reduce future costs while also adding these other benefits to our system, and keep it at the same price. So I wouldn't say that the every other week collection is, we're giving up weekly collection in trade-off for these other benefits, but they're really intended to work in tandem to provide greater benefits, implement a system that has a successful model throughout the rest of the county, and prevent future recycling increases. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I do understand that this does have the perception of a reduction in service, and it being built, and yeah, it does give the perception of a reduction in service, and saying that it has no cost. Also, I want to make sure that it feels genuine, and that there is a real benefit to that. So I'm not sure if you have a follow-up question, if we didn't answer that necessarily the way you were expecting.
I think we're good, Mr. Dutton, if you want to continue on.
All right, thank you. Well, whoever stole my thunder on the last slide, you already know about this one, but we would be extending, or Waste Connections would be extending free recycling services for all government facilities and parks. The greatest benefit here is it just reduces that barrier if recycling is prevented at any government facility, parks, buildings, et cetera, if cost is a barrier. And if it's not a barrier and people are already paying for it, this reduces that government cost for providing recycling services at any of the city-owned facilities. So I know for us, it's our government buildings as well as our parks. And I think there's a few other facilities that are open to the public that during that provide free recycling, but this would be extended to all the cities as well. The last one is a solid waste outreach plan. So Clark County is still growing a lot, and there is an increasing list of outreach needs coming from state legislation and the needs of the community. Like Derek mentioned, we've had a rough couple of years as far as the recycling markets, expectations on how clean the recycling is when it gets sent out, as well as a lot of state legislation. I don't know how many, well, there's quite a few quite a few bills this year that are going to put greater expectations around outreach, education, and performance around food waste, and around methane gas generation at landfills. So there's just a lot that we really need to be good and consistent at talking to our public about. So we have, instead of adding outreach staff across the programs, we're really setting better expectations and performance metrics for all of our outreach and education, including the work plans for Waste Connections, outreach and education, some of the reporting requirements, and just really assuring that we're all doing the right work as far as communicating with our public goes. So this will develop regularly updated and evaluated outreach and education topics and strategies, and prioritizing the topics that we need to focus on as a government annually, really prioritizing what those big topics are. This contract also includes, I know we mentioned not adding staff, so I'll give a little bit of a background here. About 2 years ago, as an alternative to some audits that we do, we worked with Waste Connections to pilot what we call the recycling advocates. And their jobs are, rather than the typical types of outreach and education that we engage the customers with, this put Waste Connections clearly labeled or branded, that's not the right term, but clearly identifiable Waste Connection staff out, working with the public, going out on recycling days, looking inside of carts, providing greater information on what they're seeing inside of the carts. And if the opportunity provides itself, if people come out and chat, it's just an opportunity to talk with a more engaged audience around the whys and hows of our recycling system. And so we've formalizing that position in this contract. It had been a county-funded pilot prior to this. One recycling advocate works for the county or is under the county contract. The other recycling advocate is under the contract for recycling for the city of Vancouver. But this does a couple of things in addition to engaging with residents. It also helps us identify what we need to focus on as far as talking to our public, whether it's Amazon bubble wrap packaging, hot, cold coffee cups, just helping us understand what is going into the recycling that's reducing its value, and helping us find better ways to talk to the public about it. And the last one is we'll be doing an electric truck pilot program. I think this will be one of 2 electric trucks, Derek. Is there one in the city of Vancouver as well?
There will be one coming to the city of Vancouver once the manufacturer figures that all out.
All right. So we are going to be, Waste Connections will be piloting an electric truck to evaluate the effectiveness and durability of electric collection trucks to inform future expectations around building a cleaner and more cost-effective fleet. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of legislation coming around greenhouse gas emissions, methane emissions related to the solid waste system. And getting ahead of some of those requirements and really understanding what will have an impact and the cost of those impacts will be one of the many benefits of this pilot. Best case scenario, we identify that we can provide a durable electric fleet of vehicles from Waste Connections that are sufficient, meet the needs of the community, and don't add cost while generating less of the gases that we're going to be required to look at in the coming years. Those are the 5 primary updates. There's some smaller updates around just cleaning up some language, making some language a little bit clearer as far as what it meant in 2008 versus what we need now. But these are the primary updates. So I wanted to stop and give folks a little bit of a chance to clarify anything here, and then I'm going to just go over the next steps very quickly, and then I will be done.
Mr. Dutton, if you'll just roll on.
All right.
We'll catch up with you at the end.
All right, thank you. So next steps, we're currently working with staff in La Center and Yakult to provide this update to their councils and leadership as well. Once we've gotten feedback, input has been gathered, we will re-engage with Waste Connections to update the language or the terms necessary. Assuming we have support from the cities that want to sign on via interlocal, we will then begin the internal legal review for moving the contract forward. We will be sharing the stakeholder feedback and presenting a Clark County Council update on the contract and seek approval for that contract, and then go through the signature and execution process. And then as soon as cities decide to support, we will engage with city staff to work through the interlocal agreement process to make sure that those interlocal agreements line up with the execution of the new contract. And then once the contract is in place, either July 1st or sooner, if we are successful in coming to agreement with the cities, we begin to work with Waste Connections to implement new contract changes. And again, there's going to be some big outreach and education and communication requirements that are going to be part of this. So every other week service are going to require significant outreach and education efforts. And we will work with our outreach teams, city PIOs, and make sure that we have the requirements and the expectations of what the cities expect of us as far as how we talk about these changes to the public. That is everything. That is my presentation. So I'm going to stop. I will leave my screen up just for a few minutes in case anybody needs me to go back to a slide, but I would turn it back over to council members for questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cortez, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dutton, it's funny, we're talking about Waste Connections. I have my class that I was talking to today. We're talking about utilities, different utilities. And one of my teaching assistants actually said, aren't utilities like a monopoly? And I kind of shook my head and I was like, well, kind of not wrong in your own little angle there, but because we don't really have another option, do we? That being said, I have a couple questions. First and foremost, how long has the city of Battleground had once a week service for recycling? Do you have that information readily available?
I don't have that information in front of me. I would rely on Mike or Derek if they have historical knowledge, but I don't have that information in front of me. I know that it would have been at least since 2008 when this contract would be put in place.
Okay, so it's safe to assume at least a decade or longer.
Correct.
Right. And I guess the reason why I mention that is because, I mean, regardless of how much, and I mean no disrespect to you or your organization, you guys provide a valuable community service. That's I'll get that out there. That's without discussion. But regardless of what wordsmithing we try to use, if our citizens have had once a week service on recycling for over a decade, and we switch over to once every week, it's either going to be looked at one of two ways. We're getting less for the same amount of money that we're paying, or secondarily, it's a price increase. So, I mean, you really can't explain it any other way other than that. And so I'm kind of concerned as to that. Secondarily, my second question to you is, looking at the jurisdictions that provide interlocal or have interlocal service, the city of Battleground is the third largest city in the county, right behind Camas. Yet we're grouped in with the two smallest jurisdictions in the county, La Center and Yakult. Why is that?
So let me just clarify. That is the decision to sign on via interlocal or to directly contract is a city decision. So that is not a category that we place you in, nor is that a dictated category.
Okay.
That is just who chose to sign on via interlocal or directly contract for services with Waste Connections or otherwise. So that is not anything we have control over. That is purely a city decision.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Okay.
In terms of the other jurisdictions that do not have interlocals, with the exception of Camas, what is the main impetus on your Ridgefields and your other communities not having interlocals with Waste Connections? Do you know that?
There's some historical reasoning, like I mentioned. So you called out Camas. You said other than Camas, with their municipally supplied service. But like I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of the way that the UTC franchise system is set up, there used to be a lot of haulers, a lot of options in the region. And then over time, those companies were sold off to other people and those contracts were transferred over. I can't vouch historically how far back all of these contracts go and cities' choices to participate in the system through an interlocal or through direct contracting. And again, at any time, they have the option to sign on via interlocal or continue to remain on their own direct contract. So that is definitely an option that the city of Battle Ground has.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Mr. Mayor, I think, and I may be alone in this, but I think I'm kind of concerned on going to the every other week service and how the community will respond to that. Secondly, most importantly, I think I'd like to at least explore the option on why we're the last large city that it has an interlocal with them. And I probably can gather the cost is a main driving factor there, but just because we could save a few pennies now doesn't mean it's the right thing to do in the future. So perhaps us getting some more information on that.
Well, let's ask Ms. Erdman. Ms. Erdman, do you happen to know?
I do not. I was going to ask Mr. Pig actually if he had some background on that.
Mr. Herzig?
No, I don't either. I would have to ask the other cities.
We can definitely do some research and dig into that and look at, we can get in touch with the other cities and see what the differences are versus the contract and the interlocal.
Wonderful.
And I can say that I think, back at the beginning of time when the state cut up the garbage industry and the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission issued garbage certificates to help manage solid waste in unincorporated parts of the county, essentially to ensure equal services for all people within the county. We go to the last road out in Cougar and charge the same price as we do in urban places like Battleground. So the model was set up to ensure that everybody has services. And then over time, cities such as Ridgefield, Camas decided to do their own garbage service, but Ridgefield, Washougal, Vancouver have opted to enter into their own agreements with a private hauler. Back in the day, it wasn't Waste Connections who was the hauler. We have acquired them over time. So if Battleground were to want to leave the Utilities and Transportation Commission portion for, say, garbage services, it would just be a matter of the UTC requires a 7-year exit notification, or there's a damages clause that you can execute, which allows you to leave sooner. You just have to pay like 7 years worth of revenue, I think, or damages, which is obviously prohibitive for most entities. And then on the recycle side, it's just a matter of developing your own, agreement or contract for recycling services. Recycling and yard debris are not regulated by the UTC. They're only regulated by Clark County. So if Battleground wanted to remove themselves from those interlocals, it's at your decision, and you would then go out to contract or however you'd want to handle it going forward on those services.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Wall.
So at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned a increase based on KPIs and other things. But you didn't ever say what that might be. Do you have those figures available for us?
I could provide them historically. The CPI is just a cost performance indicator or index the annual adjustments for inflation. And that is just how our contracts are adjusted year over year. So I don't have the numbers historically in front of me, but I feel like typically they're, they're inflationary, so around 3%. And then if Waste Connections meets certain KPIs in the contract, then they get a percentage of that CPI or that inflationary increase to the contract. And that's typically incorporates a fuel index. So the cost of fuel, the cost of labor, cost of machinery, just inflationary over time.
So in other words, it's going to be quite a hike.
No, it happens annually, and typically when you break up the cost because of the number of customers throughout the county that are provided service through our contract and then the individual contracts, typically that CPI largely goes on. I mean, it's an increase. I don't want to wordsmith or make anything. It is an increase, but it is typically not anything that shows up on more than a penny on a couple of cents on anybody's bill.
Okay.
regular invoice. So it's not a new thing. It's something that we've had in place for all of our contracts, and is typical of this type of a utility contract for solid waste, and has been happening since the beginning of these contracts and will be happening throughout the rest of these contracts as well. So it wouldn't be a significant rate increase from the perspective of a per customer rate increase.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We can provide the calculations if that would be helpful. The historical percentages as well as what residents saw on their rates as far as an increase goes, but I don't want to call it's insignificant, but it is typically around a couple of cents.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I looked up my bill and January 1st, there was a rate increase. It was like 70 cents.
Is that, I don't know if somebody's asking a question I couldn't hear.
No,
No, sorry.
She was just
okay.
she was looking at her own bill.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Rate
Mr. McCoy.
increase.
Yeah, just a quick question. The new garbage can rollout, I take it's the same gallons as the 32 allowed by households. I'm seeing yeses.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah, we will, basically what we'll do is we'll map everybody to what their current service is. So if you have a 32 gallon can, we would, and we'll probably, we haven't gotten exactly here, but we'll probably send a notice that says, hey, you got 32 gallons now. Do you want 30 gallons when we do that? And then 2 would be 64, 3 would be 96.
and then this might be a longer answer, but you're welcome to email me. As somebody in a previous life who used to get work in the recycled business, essentially as a customer, is there any cost analysis on going away from a commingled recycling collection? Is that a analysis that you do before you do this contract?
I think it's discussable. I think you talk about, I'll go back to, and I apologize, I did not see who made the comment.
Mr.
earlier.
Dutton, Mr.
Yes.
Dutton, we're running close on time. So if you would take Mr. McCoy up on the email offer,
Okay.
it's troy.mccoy@cityofbg.org.
Great.
And
Thank
he
you.
will forward it to the rest of us. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Well, it is almost time, but let me finish up. I have a few quick questions that should be pretty simple.
I'll try to
Now,
be concise. Thank you.
yeah, now with the carts we have currently, if the wheel comes off, you're pretty much stuck with a one-wheel cart because no one seems to want to replace it. If the new cart breaks, who's going to replace it? Who's responsible?
Derek?
I have to look at this particular contract. I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I can give you the follow-up on that. There's certain situations where it's built in that it's a free replacement, and there's some where there's a replacement cart cost. And I just honestly don't remember. We have 6 contracts in Clark County. Well, we have more than that, but I don't remember how this one reads. We can get that feedback for you.
And then there are the breast cancer carts. Will they be available as well?
Yes, we will
Okay.
continue to support the Pink Lemonade project. That's a great program.
And then just as a quick answer, what is the percentage of the recyclables that are unusable?
Ooh, that's a good question. It varies by area, varies by demographic. In general, it's upwards of 30% of the material that's in a cart is unusable. It's something we're working hard on education, and it's anything from contamination to shredded paper, material in a plastic bag that we can't handle. There's all sorts of different reasons, but it's about 30%.
Thank you. And the internet reminders that come across on the internet, are they from you, Waste Connection, or are they from the county?
We partner with a company called named Recollect, and the city of Vancouver has helped manage that with us, but we also coordinate with Clark County. So it's kind of a consortium, but there's a private entity that manages the software, and we provide them some of our data as far as the data, the route, the data, the pickup, and everything else. So they're pulling from our database to send out messages through their service.
And then glass. I walk the city every day. Fridays, as I walk through, I see the old containers of glass. Will there be bigger glass containers for 2 weeks? Because mostly when I see them, they're slam full.
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting thing to see all the different types of containers and carts and bins that come in the yard every day. So we have 18-gallon glass bins available. And so if a customer needs that size, then we can provide that to a customer. But some people still have the old nestable, stackable glass bins that they used to use when we had 3 different types of bins.
Yes, the
You'll see
brown and the
those.
green.
Yeah, and those are small. And the glass rolls out the front. So we have fully enclosed 18-gallon bins that are a little bit larger that people can do. We can provide that for free of charge to swap those out for people.
Excellent. And then my last one is to you. Would you forward a picture of these carts to the city so they can send them to us so that we can see them?
Which carts do you, all,
The new
are you talking
ones.
about any cart we've discussed?
Yes, the new, whatever the new cart is.
Okay. I can show you from another, like City of Vancouver, what they'll look like. They're just basically like a recycle cart. They're just going to be gray with a black lid on them, but I'll send you a picture of them.
Yeah, and if you would do that. And then Ms. Urban, one quick question to you. If this company sent out these internet reminders, we don't put on our website any private company information. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We can, however, share their, for example, if they do a Facebook posting to get information out, we can definitely share that on our page so it gets out to our viewers as well.
Okay, so that's why I ask you, sir, whether it was from the county, of which we could put on our website.
Oh,
But if it comes from a private company, we can't do that. Well, it is almost 5 till. I appreciate your time. We will, if we have any questions, further them to Mr. Herzig. And again, thanks for spending your Monday night with us.
It's been a pleasure. Take care. And thank you all very much for your time. It was a
Yes,
pleasure
sir.
to be here. Look forward to talking some more.
thanks for your
Bye-bye.
time.
We'll gather back together here in about 7 minutes. See you at 7 o'clock.
I didn't know that for the longest time. And then somebody gets kicked out, they're going,
You're better off just throwing it away.
yeah, well, they.
And that's all they're doing.
The glass?
Yeah.
Better off throwing it away.
They're not
Energy
recycling.
wise.
Why not?
But you
But
can
there's
take
no
the
market.
customer energy and recycle it and transport it, then that's just a landfill.
And there's no market.
It's the cost for them to handle the 2 months is like $2 or something, so that's not the cost. I always thought I spent $50.
Exactly.
So, anyway, I didn't know how to ask my question, right? I
Yeah.
was like, blah, 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 blah.
I mean, I look at all my neighbors and if I had some of the problems, if I had gone to the stores that they went to, there's no way in hell I'd put those on the street.
My neighbor has one.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Herzog, when this contract comes, it'll of course be forwarded to us to peruse through, not that, what do we know, but at least for us to peruse through.
Yeah, what I figure I'd do is if we want to move forward with it, when we do the interlocal, I would include the attachment, so you can see everything.
And when does the trash part come up? Are we a couple of years into a trash part?
Yeah, I think that's coming up. I don't have the date. I can email that out, but we've been talking about that. I think it's coming up.
And I wanted to ask him, when he said commercial, does apartment complexes aren't considered commercial?
No, they service the multifamily.
And then if you would ask Mr. Dutton, when the county has parks that recycle, I mean, who's responsible for that? And what, I mean, think of if we had one at Kiwanis, it would be full on Monday. They don't pick up until the following Friday, a week. I mean, is it the city's responsibility? Does the county go through and just empty it into something and then?
No, so we service all the parks and then bring it down. I assume it would be the same.
Oh, okay. So as you go through and pick up the trash, you would pick up the recycles.
They bring it all down to off, so they pick up and off.
And then do you have a recycling dumpster?
We don't have this point. All the city buildings do, but none of the parks
Yes, since it's going to be free in this case, that I'm just trying to figure out, because as I look through the recycling now, as I walk around, no one reads what's sent out. I mean, there's pizza boxes, there's all kinds of crap in there. So I'm not sure that I want city employees to go through and start.
No, I think we would just collect it, put it in a.
And let them sort it out?
They essentially do what they do for residential.
Oh, okay. Doesn't bother me. I haven't said any bad words, have I? No. The night's still young, though. Okey doke. Well, yeah.
I mean, it's free.
It's, yeah, it's. Sleep until 7.
Horrible.
Where did I say? Yeah. Two of those, please. No. The time is 7 o'clock. If you'll join me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Ms. Falcon, good evening. Pleasure to see you. Let's see who's here. If you would please call the roll.
Councilmember Walters,
Here.
Councilmember Bowman,
Here.
Mayor Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Cortez,
Here.
Councilmember Davis,
Here.
Deputy Mayor DeRochers, here, and Councilmember McCoy.
Here.
Looks like we're all here. Council member reports. Anyone? Mr. Cortez, we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, as many on this council remember from many, many years past, the YMCA coming to make presentations before us time and time again. And they were a frequent caller of mine as mayor. They recently reached out to me and wanted to meet up, and so I afforded them about 20 minutes of my time over the weekend. And they did give me an update on where they are. It's actually pretty encouraging. They have actually not only purchased the property that they are going to be locating the YMCA on, but they're going to be making their last payment on it the end of March. And so they will own that property free and clear. They also have very promising efforts on the federal front with federal funds, with some state funding. And so they asked, and they are not, they did make it clear that they are not just coming, wanting to come to ask for a handout, but they wanted to come to have some very serious conversations as their project moves forward quickly. And so I wanted to ask you, Mayor, if you would allow them to come on a future agenda, perhaps sometime in April, to give an update on where they are. So,
Ms. Erdman, you've spoken to them as well, haven't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And what is your view?
We didn't speak with the YMCA directly. We spoke with Mr. Johansson as his architectural firm is representing them. That is correct. We heard the same story. They are ready to make their last payment on the property. The reason why we met with them is they wanted to look at potentially subdividing that property, as if they're just going to do the building that houses the pool, they don't need the entire piece. So they are kind of working with a developer to potentially subdivide and do another development there at this time. That was kind of the extent of our meeting.
yeah,
They-
that
On this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that aligns with what they told me as well. So
Yes, sir. Please.
Is that development going to be commercial?
That was their question. One of the developers that is looking at partnering with them does more multifamily. So they wanted to talk with the city about a potential rezone. Mr. Crummett and I met with them. We indicated to them that from the staffing standpoint, that's not something we would support, as that is right off of the 503 corridor and in our main commercial corridor.
Thank you.
I don't have a calendar in front of me. Ms. Erdman, do you happen to have a calendar? What are our meeting dates in April?
They are
And do we have anything scheduled currently for the 6 o'clock hour?
April 4th and April 18th. And I don't believe so, but I'll pull up the advanced agenda here real quick.
They're free right now, Ms. Cameron? Yes, sir.
Can I make a suggestion? I would like them to come to the council meeting so we can take action. I've heard this for 12 years, and we tell them to do things and we tell them to bring different things back. And it's just this giant circle. We literally heard this last year. I don't even think it's been a year since we've met with the county on this, and they supposedly had money commitment from the county, commitment from us. We had the meeting with the county and us and them to iron all that out, and here we are again. And
I think I apologize.
No,
I'm
no,
cutting you out, Councilmember Bone, but I think a lot would happen with the county, and even they would say this. They said as much when I spoke with them, that Councilor Mevigy got over his skis on a lot of issues and wanted to push this through at the Cedars. And so that caused a lot of moving parts and miscommunication. And so, again, regardless of which way the council wants to go with this, I think it'd be great just to have them in front of us.
Well, I think
one more
by
time.
then we'll know if they're getting any money from the state.
Right.
Because from my contacts at the state, and I'll be surprised if they do, because the state told them last time they want to be last money in, and they still have not done anything except purchase a piece of property. And I think they interpreted that as, once we have property, the state's going to give us money. So I would rather do it in a council meeting where we can take action and either say yes or no, tell them this is the direction we're going. wait 2 years until there's a new council here and come back and bug us again if that's what they choose to do. But that way we can give them direction and not just sit through the same thing that we've heard for the last 12 years in a study session, except, that it's changed to a pool and an ice skating rink.
Yeah.
So
I have no preference whether it's a study session or council meeting, so.
What, Ms. Erdman, Ms. Cammer, what do the 4th and the 18th look like for business?
They are wide open.
They're wide open.
Has a study session, yeah.
Well, I think at this point, it would be probably doing them a service and us a service that either we're hot, we're cold, or we're one of the two. We're not lukewarm anymore. So if you'll ask them which day they prefer, the 4th or the 18th, we'll actually put them on the business end of the meeting. And at that point, the 7 of us can hear the story and decide what we wish to do.
can we have what they're asking for too?
Well, I was,
If they're only here to tell us, hey, this is what we're doing, and they want to do a rezone, or are they coming back where they want money again, or they want?
it will be, in my estimation, and just speaking for myself, it will be their only chance this year, this calendar year, to come and state their case. So I'll ask the rest of my compatriots if that's reasonable. Is that reasonable?
As long as they're ready.
Yes, if they come, this will be their chance for this year. Okay, perfect.
I will reach out to them. I know they're working through a bunch of different details right now. So I'll reach out, see if they will be ready by then, set a date for an agenda.
Perfect. Anything else, Mr. Cortez?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's everything I have.
Wonderful. Ms. Walters.
So I attended the mosquito control district meeting last Tuesday. And I think I mentioned a couple months ago that the county has decided to step away from the administration of the mosquito control district altogether. They're by the end of the year, this year. They will be, the board will be continuing, and they're planning a drone program, and there's some concern about the building that they're using right now is sitting on county property. They own the building, but they don't own the property. And
That's
so
a tough stance.
so at this moment, we're trying to figure out if they're going to have to move their operation or sell the property. It's going to be a lot of kind of back and forth with the county to figure out what situation we're going to be in. But again, the drone program's pretty cool. It's going to hopefully pick up on some places that we hadn't been able to look at before. So, and they're actually testing much earlier this year to see what types of mosquitoes we have in our area and whether they're disease-borne or.
Are they using the drones to spray?
No, it's just for observation.
Oh, okay.
So they're not
So-
using it to spray at all?
No.
And will there be a banner behind it with the phone number so that our folks can call and go, there's a drone coming through my neighborhood. Oh, yeah, it's the mosquito people. No worries. So Ms. Erdman, again, Ms. Hayes, if the county's getting out of the business by the end of the year, then we're getting out of that business as well, I assume.
I would assume it's the first I've heard, so I can do some more research.
If you will, let's look and see what their thoughts are. And I don't know why we would still stay on it if the county's, here's a good term, if they're bugging out. Tip your waitress. Okay, anything else, Ms. Walton?
No.
And Mr. Bowman, sir. Sorry.
Yeah,
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. So just short and sweet, I attended the Urban County Policy Board meeting last Monday. We had all the presentations presented for the grant request. And then the next day I attended the group formerly known as JAG, It's now the ECHO, the Ending Community Homelessness Organization. So we haven't really done much yet. We've just been restructuring. They were going to eliminate the small city position. Luckily, they are keeping it and actually added all the small cities to the group. So I'm excited to see what that group brings, and hopefully I'll have more to talk about that in future meetings. So thank you.
The they she's referring to is the county. The county wanted to get rid of the small cities. Guess they have a power thing. As far as I go for the mayor's report, we're still solvent, aren't we, Ms. Lowry? And things are looking good. Moving on to presentations, Ms. Erdman, it's your turn.
All right, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing, well, not introducing, reintroducing Ms. Alicia Smith. We were able to promote her to the communications manager and PIO position that Ms. Gilberti has so expertly done over the last several years, and she will be retiring at the end of the month. A little bit about Alicia. She started February 1st and she's full swing into her training. I think last week she officially got the PIO phone handed over. So she is the person that is answering now with emergency issues for the city. Alicia moved to Battleground when she was 4 years old and graduated from Prairie High School. She first came to work for the city in September of 2005 as a temporary customer service clerk in the executive department before accepting a full-time position in February of 2006. In her 16 years of service with the city, she has worked with human resources, with public works, with engineering, community development, and most recently, she has served the past 8 years with our police department as the administrative assistant to the chief. Alicia and her husband, Nate, have been married for nearly 17 years, and they have 3 daughters, Jocelyn, Eloise, and Ophelia. When she's not taking care of kids to play dates and soccer games, Alicia enjoys crafting, movies, spending time outdoors, and tackling various DIY projects around her home. We are very excited to have Alicia move into this new role. If you'd like to say anything, Alicia, go ahead.
Please, Ms. Smith.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say, of course, I'm not a new face here, but I am excited to take on this new opportunity and many more years with the city of Battleground. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to working with each of you.
It's a pleasure to have you, and it's just 2 blocks closer to your home, we'll assume. So when you come to work, again, it's a pleasure to have you. Moving on, citizens communications. Ms. Calkin, were there any?
No, sir.
I'll ask in the audience if there are any. No, sir. We're moving on to the consent agenda. Does any council member see any reason to have anything withdrawn?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on to the public hearing. Ordinance number 2022-01, Premier Investment Corporation Development Agreement. Ms. Erdman, is that you?
Yes, it is. We took a look at this at the last meeting. This is the development agreement for the city to do the wetland permitting and mitigation for the construction of Northwest 15th Avenue, which is a street planned in our transportation system plan. This is part of a subdivision development, so I won't go into too much more detail as we discussed this last time. So if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, we can open the public hearing.
Let's go ahead and open the public hearing, and then we'll see if there are any questions. Is there anyone here this evening to comment on 2022-01? Yes, sir, if that's you.
I'm the developer of the project, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Perfect.
Hard, Persick and Erdman and Bill.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. Hearing that, seeing there were no written or anything, perfect. Then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll ask, are there any questions from the council? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just did a request to speak.
Oh, I'm going to have to get used to looking at that. Mr. Bowman, you're first, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to adopt ordinance 2022-01, the Premier Investment Corporation Development Agreement as presented.
Second.
Thank you. That's the ballgame for you?
Yep.
Ms. Walters?
I just have one question, and this may have been addressed before.
If you'll come to the microphone, sir.
This actually might be for Ms. Erdman. So the 15th Avenue, is it 15th Avenue? Yeah, is done in place of, instead of them paying for the wetland mitigation. Am I understanding that correctly?
So are you asking that if we're,
I'm just curious as to why the need for the developer agreement.
So the need for the developer agreement is just to ensure that we have the timeline set forward for the most part. It basically is laying out that we are agreeing that the city will get the permits within I think it's a 24-month period. Once those are acquired, then the contractor has a timeline to construct that road, to basically get the engineering plans approved and then do the construction within 24 months. If we get that permit within that timeline, then we would be responsible for the road. So it just kind of helps keep the project moving along and set the timelines for the project.
And then the other question I had was, as far as the permittage goes, I think you mentioned before that it was faster for the city to get that permit than the developer. What's the difference in time, and why is there such a difference?
Yeah, typically governmental agencies are processed quicker when it comes to wetland permittings. And it's really hard to nail down a timeline with the Army Corps or the Department of Ecology because they're always running into different issues with staffing. But we have found that from the city standpoint, the last one I think was 4 to 6 months. And Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And on the developer side, I believe it takes closer to a year or two, but I'll let Mr. Hersig weigh in on that as well because he has more experience in that.
Yeah, our last two took 3 months and 2 months, and typically I hear from developers it could be up to a year.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Mine's a little bit more involved. I think I have a few more questions. My biggest question is if the developer, this road has been on the comp plan. It's well known. It's not a big surprise. This developer comes in and the road is already supposed to be there. I just don't understand why they're not footing the bill. Why are we doing these permits when I know it's a time consideration type thing, but I have a problem with if the developer is going to build there, they knew it was going to be there, the road had to be there. Why is the city taking any of this on? Could you put me on this?
Ms. Erdman.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And truthfully, it is completely a legislative decision. Our staff report and preliminary approval of the project require the developer to build Northwest 15th. That would include doing the permitting and the mitigation. They have appealed that staff report. There was several issues for the appeal, with Northwest 15th being one of them, intersection spacing and block development being another. So as we started working through this, we kind of just came to an agreement to alleviate some of that, to make sure that through the appeal process, the city could ensure that Northwest 15th was built. So we started discussions on a development agreement, which we've done this in the past to do the mitigation and permitting to ensure that the street gets built. Now, whether you guys want to enter into this agreement, that is strictly legislative.
So, for example, if we say no, then the developers, I understand, go to the hearing examiner. Then they hear it, and the outcome is what? What are the options if the hearing examiner takes this on and says, yeah, they have to what? Investigate it. They have to look and see if the road is deemed necessary for the developer. How do you go from there?
There's multiple decision points that go into this. One is, was it on the plan? Does it meet nexus and proportionality? It probably wouldn't be wise to go into the legal discussion of this because if it does go down that path, we wouldn't want to discuss that on the record. We could discuss some legalities in executive session, but it essentially goes to the hearings examiner to make that determination. If he chooses to approve what we have, then the developer is responsible for building the road. If he does not agree with us, then that would go back and the citizens would be responsible for developing the road.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we have a second already. So Ms. Calkin, if you'll, well, we'll do it. Man, I keep forgetting about this. If you'll set up the voting pad. You're exactly right. Well, if I had my glasses. Ordinance number 2022-01, Premier Investment Corporation Development Agreement. And we done that. Oh, I'm asking you to do that. I'm new at this. Would you read that, Ms. Calkin? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Ordinance number 2022-01, an ordinance adopting a development agreement between the city of Battle Ground, Washington and Premier Investment Corporation for the permitting, mitigation, and construction of Northwest 15th Avenue.
Here we are.
You're doing great, Mr. Mayor. It's not an easy job.
Thank you. Thank you. Especially at my age, my advanced age. There we are. Looks like 6-2. It passes. Gosh, math ain't my deal either tonight. 5-2. There we go. Let's roll. Thank you. Moving on to ordinance number 2022-02, budget amendment. Ms. Erdman, we've lost you, but we'll just go to Ms. Lowry straight on.
Perfect. Thank you, council. So before you have the ordinance 2022-02 for the amending the budget, I'll just go really quickly through those line items. The first item is a lodging tax application that came in subsequent to the budget approval in December for a pig jam in the fall time. The lodging tax committee did meet and approved it. So this is just the formal coming to council for that final approval as that process goes. The next two items are related to each other. They're the formal adoption for the budget for the landscaping project at the community center that this council pushed for January 3rd. So the project in itself, $50,000 from the general fund and then $10,000 from a private donation for a total cost of $60,000. If the project doesn't cost that much, then we obviously get to keep that money in the coffers. The next two items are related to an allocation of the decant facility ownership between stormwater and sewer. We're changing it to a 75-25% instead of the 50-50 related to some grant funding. We have a grant from the Department of Ecology that's paying for 75% of the project, and that's strictly stormwater. So that needs to correlate to those expenses. So stormwater will own 75% and sewer will own 25%. The next two line items are actually related to the developer agreement that was just approved for the wetland permit extension. So this would be paid for with traffic impact fees. And then it also is the transfer from TIF to the 350 to pay for it. The next line item is related to a parks grant that was received for our playground program, which would improve and expand our playground program by $38,000. And the final item is related to the state gave the city some funds late last year related to the change in policing reforms with House Bill, the House Bill that went through with the legislative changes. And the request is for additional emphasis patrols, which the overtime that's currently in the budget is strictly related to filling any sort of vacancies. And the thought is to increase those emphasis patrols and additional allotments needed for overtime. So open to questions.
Okey doke. So let's do that. Let's open the questions. Mr. Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 2022-02, the budget amendment.
Second.
As presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to some questions before we vote. Ms. Davis. Do you have a question?
Well, yes, but Adrian was.
Oh, did you have any more questions?
No, I did not.
Oh, that
Okay.
was just you. Okay. Question about the grant of the 90,000 for the police department. Is there we got the information about how the money was going to, was that the only option for how they wanted, I mean, this was discussed on how they wanted this money to go, and it was okayed by everybody as far as, yes, the department would like this, and this help the department, is that Chief nodding? Correct, so we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure if there was other options, if it was acceptable, did everybody get, it was a very nice, almost like a present for $90,000 that we were not expecting. And I just want to make sure that it's being allocated. There wasn't anything like extra training or, because it went to a lot of the DUI and I know the overtime budget, and then there was extra that went through. And so I was just kind of curious if training came up or if the officers wanted any other things that might pop up, or if everything's good and you're happy with the way the money's going to be distributed.
Yeah, so if I may answer directly, we had contemplated with the city manager and I and staff at my department over there as well, what best uses for that money may be to help us meet certain goals. One of the issues that we've had because of staffing issues in general is we haven't had a lot of extra people to do extra work. So the intent was to earmark at least this money to be able to provide some of that extra work, extra DUI patrol type of things that are extra DUI patrol. We have a need to address certain property crimes like catalytic converter thefts that we can't just provide resources for without other duty time to do that. Our overtime budget as it is not, we're not able, again, because of staffing, I'm worried about our overtime trend, using up that money just to fill vacancies for minimum staffing. So I was trying to be a little more intentional with the spending of overtime. And by allocating that $90,000 that way would enable us to do that kind of thing. Traffic enforcement work, we do some with Target Zero, but we could do a lot more, I think. Parking emphasis, traffic enforcement, DUI patrol, certain property crimes. It takes people and time outside of their normal work time to do that. So that's really what this was about. And it's it is really about trying to be as responsible and responsive as we can to what's being asked of us in the community. So really, that's kind of the point, is to be intentional with that money and be focused enforcement.
Excellent, thanks, appreciate it.
Mr. Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, this is going to be for you. Ms. Erdman, this will be for Chief. Sorry, if that's okay.
No worries.
How are you going to track that? Because if we have a number of officers out right now because of FMLA, we got a lot of officers working overtime already, and we see this trend continue throughout the year, how are we going to track $90,000 that we're giving you to do more emphasis? And how are you going to get officers to sign up for that? Because I know in the past, I used to do, as you know, a lot of the DUI emphasis and go on them. And years ago, we would have, 4 or 5 of our officers go on these Target Zero things. and go do DUI emphasis. And it seemed like the last couple of years, we were lucky to get one, maybe two that wanted to do it. And those all paid overtime. So what is your plan to track this? And what is your plan? Because what I don't want to do is sit in this room in 6 months from now and go, where's our uptick in traffic? And I want to talk to you about it in just a little bit when we talk streets, because we're going to talk about the 55% of the people that are speeding through town in that 16 to 25 range, right? And so how are you going to track that? How are you going to be accountable for that extra $90,000 for overtime? And how are you going to get your officers to buy in to work that overtime?
Well, tracking is easy. To our question, obviously, tracking part is easy. Getting them to work the emphasis is a struggle. I can't sit here today and promise that I will give you what I intend to do is that of that 90,000 for overtime to earmark internally about 40,000 of that, because I still see a trend using our the current allocated overtime money. We're so short staffed, as you know. We've used about 9.6% of our overtime budget right now, and we're at 16% of the year. We're doing okay, but we have more need recently. I see that trend continuing. If at best we're gonna run out of that money. So I don't think it's appropriate internally for me to allocate all $90,000 to say we're gonna do $90,000 worth of emphasis. This is not feasible. 40,000 is more of an earmark that I believe internally. It gives us 480 something hours roughly, divided up into those 4 or so categories that I mentioned a minute ago. Tracking those by categories is easy, and being able to present that is easy. But the second part of the question, there are officers now that are working overtime just to cover minimum shifts. So to promise when, in a best laid plan, I want 3 officers to do a traffic emphasis on some day for 5 or 6 hours or whatever it is, I may have to move days around. So we have to be creative about which days. I'm still optimistic that we're going to get staffing. I'm still optimistic that we're still hiring. We're still trying.
Yeah.
So I'm still optimistic by the middle of the year or so, hopefully we'll have more people staffed here and not have that need for minimum staffing. Therefore, then the ability for those officers to be able to work and not just only have to work the minimum staffing, but that is the priority, is to cover the minimum staffing. This is an opportunity, at least when we have the people available to do these emphasis kind of work.
So what do you think? So you're saying you're going to use 50,000 or 40,000 roughly for the overtime that you're going to need to do that. What is the other 50 going to be used for?
To cover that, which I expect us to probably get to at the end of the year, just for minimum staffing.
Okay.
If we don't use minimum staffing, then we can increase toward the third or fourth quarter of the year. We can increase specific holiday type emphasis, things that come up the July 4th, kind of middle of the year, maybe not that yet, but those kind of special emphasis that, and we're watching the trends of how we're spending our overtime now.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to keep track of that monthly. And so readjusting that whole $90,000, whether we have the ability, if the trends looking like that, we're not going to get to the whole overtime budget that's currently budgeted, then we can adjust for more emphasis. And what I really want to do that we have not been able to do in years past, as you know, that from about November to December, we're I think missing a lot of opportunities because we don't have staff. And again, we have thefts, we have vandalism that occurs during those time periods, holiday times, and DUI emphasis that we're not doing. That's where I'd like to see that money go. But it's going to be a balancing act depending on how much we're using that just to cover minimum staff.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Erdman, in November of last year, you presented a budget to us that we voted on, I believe, the first Monday in December. In that budget, I assume you asked all the departments what they thought they needed for the year 2022. I know you did that. That's the way it works. To come now in the middle of February and start telling us that things ain't looking so good is bothersome to me. No one can foresee the future, and I understand that. But to come on the third week of February and start saying that we don't know now whether what October, November, and December are going to look like. I'm a little concerned in that fact. I want, honestly, to take this $90,000 and set it aside and put it under the control of the city council and have the city come back every time they need the dollar to ask us for that dollar with a plan. I understand the enforcement. I've asked for the enforcement. I think we've all asked for the enforcement. But the problem in the past has been we've always given the money and we've not necessarily seen the end results, the plan. It was, and Chief, I mean nothing by this, but it was, we were overcome by the situation. The $40,000 all of a sudden becomes 10. And then what do we do at that point? So there have been in the past a lot of promises, and the situation has overrun them, and the promises are forgotten. I think at this point, if we decided as the council to withhold the 90 grand, and as you and the city come up with a plan, if you need $15,000, the city would do that. The council would do that. But to just give 90 grand away right now, to me, seems to be, once we do that, we're out. The 7 of us are out, as far as I can see. We have lost our voice in that come October, when we start asking, is there going to be a pedestrian type deal in the rainy season? The rainy season is dangerous to do that. We really don't have the money. We're out. We'll see about it in 23. So there's a motion on the floor and there is a second.
Mayor Johnson, could I clarify a few things if you don't mind?
Please, ma'am.
So I just would like to reiterate a couple of things that you said. You indicated that we did our budget and that now we're coming to you in February and we're in trouble. That's really not the case. Our budget is set, like Chief said, we're 9.6% into our overtime. If that was an issue that we thought was going to be on the table right now, we would have waited until later to come back with a budget amendment if we reached our overtime budget. The only reason why we're adding this now is because the state has awarded this money to us. It's not actually our money that you're allocating to them. It's the state's money that's awarded to us. It was awarded at the end of last year, so we kind of missed the budget cycle. As we were discussing it, it was mentioned that council would like to see this highlighted on how we're planning on spending the money. So that's why this is being brought forward. We're not coming to you saying, hey, we're in trouble, we're not going to make it. That would have happened. There's a very good possibility that we may not make it within our existing overtime budget, but you're exactly right. We wouldn't have be coming to you now. That would be later in the year with an explanation of why. This is just allocating that $90,000 from the state. Now, we could have just absorbed this into, wages for legal and police. That's what most jurisdictions are doing, but we really wanted to just highlight for you guys and the community how this money was going to be spent that's been passed down.
Well, the state sent the money, but of course the city council has the final say.
Yes. I just, we're not in trouble yet, but
it's not the city's money. It's the people's money. And as their representatives, it falls to us. Have I got that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that we're not coming, saying we're in trouble at this point. We're just trying to emphasize what that money would be directed.
I understand you don't have your hat in hand yet.
Yes.
Mr. Rogers.
I was kind of changing my mind to talk, but I was just going to say that I think this is a good use of the money, especially with all the things that we've requested over, several months or years of wanting the emphasis and everything. So I think it's a good opportunity to have this extra money and be able to do those things for us. So I'm excited to see what kind of things you are able to do, and hopefully, be able to do all the emphasis and arrest a lot of people. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Okay. Let's don't go that far.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McCoy, sir.
Yeah, just question, is there any timeline on the grant that if it was not awarded, that in a certain period that we would then lose it?
No, there's no time
Okay.
requirements or even reporting requirements.
And then secondly, is there, as far as reporting back on this, is there a commitment we can get back as far as the data tracking on the emphasis spending, as far as what would be appropriate, I guess, is what I'm asking.
We could report back as often as you want, after every emphasis, every quarter, every month, however council wants that report.
Personally, quarterly would be great. And then finally, if the money is not used on those emphasis spending items, what would be the end result of those monies?
Could go back into consideration for the 23 budget.
So it doesn't roll back to the state.
No.
It is our money. Okay. Mr. Rose.
Yeah, sorry, one more thing.
That's
So,
okay.
just to clarify, this money is because of all the recent changes in in law, right?
Correct.
So this is to help offset all the extra expenses that are related to that.
Very broad. It can even be a cultural change, such as folks not wanting to become the police officers because of the policing change. It's a very open and broad, so long as it is related to police and the changes to the laws.
Okay, and it's just to help offset all these things that are happening in the state, their little bonus.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so to just kind of go further on that, part of the nexus there with these emphasis is improving forward-facing relationships with the community. That's one of the things that the legislature wanted police to do, is rebuild those relationships. So that's the nexus here, is meeting some community demand, forward-facing, being present, is how that was allocated for specific grant purposes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So how does that build relationships when you're giving DUIs?
People love getting DUIs. I see them on Thursday. They always thank me. I don't think that
I'm
it's
not-
necessarily building relationships with a particular suspect, but it is building relationships with the community that you're taking drinking and driving within that community seriously.
Yeah.
That we are making areas safer. There's known things in the community that I won't necessarily say where, that people get concerned of drinking and driving in certain areas, showing that we're aware and enforcing that.
Because I think that's, as we go forward into this year, if this is what we're doing, and we're going to put an emphasis on this, and we have a new PIO, and I think this is stuff that we need to be putting out to the public of, not necessarily, the Battleground Facebook site will put out where we're doing it. So you don't have to put out where we're doing it, but putting out to the public that, hey, we're putting an emphasis on, pedestrian safety. We're putting an emphasis on driver impairment. We're putting an emphasis on distracted driving, whatever that may be. And I mean, you know better than we do, Chief, that I know there's certain months that are dedicated to that kind of stuff, but putting that out there and letting people know, hey, we're going to be out here doing this, because there's a section of the community that wants that done. The section of the community that gets the ticket doesn't necessarily want it done, but we can say, we've put it out there. We told you guys we were going to do this, right? And so I think it can serve 2 points there, and kind of putting it out to people and letting people know that, hey, we're out here doing this month, or whatever it may be, whatever you guys decide, but to focus on it so that it's not a bad thing.
Right. Can I clarify just a little bit what Christine said? In that when we talk about building relationships, to me, it also means to be responsive to what the community and citizens are asking for.
Yeah.
So enforcement, you don't typically think of the like you say, the suspect or the person that's being enforced upon doesn't necessarily see that. Although there is some room to suggest that some DUI arrestees' lives are completely changed.
Oh, yeah.
When they get arrested. There is that opportunity. But I see all of this as more of a response to this community that more than not wants us. They want us to work. They want us to do these specific types of things. And that's how my take is on building the relationships in that way. Is to be more responsive than we have currently the need to do.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else, Ms. Calkin, let's do it right this time. How about if we read the ordinance title?
Ordinance number 2022-02. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Battle Ground, Washington, amending the city's 2022 budget ordinance 2021-26.
Thank you. And let's try the vote tab again here. And let's recognize there are just 7 of us.
Just trying to become a strong mayor.
6-1. Okay, we move on. We're going on to 2021 year-end financial overview. Ms. Lowry.
Thank you. Wait for the slides that appear on your screen.
No.
He's got it.
Okay. So I have some great news.
So far, I'm the only one
There we
that's
go. Oh.
see what you're talking
Oh.
about. Let's wait a moment and see if we can see what, I can see it. The other 7 of us can't. There we are. Oh, wait.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Go figure.
Okay, Ms. Lowry.
Okay. Well, the good news is like Mr. Johnson always asks, we are solvent. That's always a win, which we have a multitude of funds that are all solvents, which is great. 2020 was a very interesting year, and 2021 has continued to be interesting. So we were entering into a recession in 2019, and then COVID happened. We thought we were going into a depression, and we've ended up in a boom. So we have seen a year-over-year increase in our sales tax. We're up $1 million from 2020 activity, which was already up an additional about $1 million from 2019 activity. So it's a 27% increase over 2020, but together we're significantly higher than what we were in 2019. A lot of it has to do with the construction that's going on in town. Our construction is up 58%. In addition, the other portion that it has to do with is vehicle sales. As you guys have probably heard, CPI has had increases of about 8% and been higher than 5%. It's a superficial CPI increase because it has to do with supply and demand. When you have vehicles and you don't have the supply, obviously prices go up and people pay that because they want the vehicles. And new vehicles you're not able to get because of the chips. So our public administration line item for sales tax, which is the retail sales tax related to vehicles, is up 81% in 2021. So all those things together between the sales tax for retail, sales tax for construction, and then the vehicle sales, that's what's driving our large increases to sales tax, which we'll talk more in detail about sales tax and total for the city related to.
May I ask you a question about that? If I buy a car in Vancouver and I register it in Battleground, Vancouver does not get the dollar?
Correct. We get the dollar.
Okay, so it's where it's registered, not sold.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct, that's great for us. So all of our citizens pay the City of Battleground sales tax rate when they get vehicles. So moving on from sales tax, development activity is also significantly up, which makes sense. If our sales tax is up with construction, that means our development activity is up related to permits. So in 2021, we had 319 new single-family residential homes. We had 9 new commercial and 6 new multifamily buildings. And that's compared to 181 new single-family homes, 4 commercial and 3 multifamily in 2020. The revenue itself is up $514,000, which is a 77% increase over 2020. So the plan check fees are also up 58% from 2020, so $232,000. Planning reviews are down slightly, which hopefully that means that development's going to slow down a little bit. but they're down about 6,002% from 2020. So real estate excise tax, a large increase again. We had a record year last year in 2020, and this year, again, we have another record year that beat our record year. A lot of that has to do with the increase in prices of homes and also just the low interest rate. People are flipping houses. So we're up 741,000, a 51% increase over 2020. We did receive $2.9 million of the ARPA funding. We have not expended that yet, but we have obligated it for those water sewer projects that we obligated earlier in 2020 or in fall 2020. Related to public works projects, we actually completed quite a few. Good job, Mark and his team. I don't know how they do it. When we were reconciling our 2021 activity, the amount of capital project activities we have ongoing right now is a lot. It's pretty amazing. Kudos to Mark and his team. We completed the City Hall re-roof project as well as HVAC. The Water Regional Treatment Tanks project with CPU was completed in 2021. The road preservation work was also completed. And then the Southwest 3rd Street and Southwest 19th Avenue improvements, the Old Town Mid-Block crossing, and the Public Works Operations Storage Building was also completed. In addition, the transportation and water system plans were also completed in 21. So a lot of boxes were checked off in 2021, and it looks to be the same will come in 22. So park rentals opened in May for long-term rentals and then mid-July for all other rentals, which is positive because we're actually getting some money from the community center when we were closed for so long because of COVID. And then the governor's proclamation related to utilities ended September 30th. So penalties, shutoffs, and service fees returned October 1st. We're back to pre-COVID. We didn't really ever see a huge increase in our delinquent bills, as you guys have seen throughout the updates that we were sending out. And we're continuing at the same amount. So again, looking at R21, this just gives you a look at our sources related to what we received in 21 versus 2020. So in total for the general fund, we received $19.4 million compared to $17 million in 2020. Again, a lot of that increase is related to the sales tax increase as well as the permitting activity. Looking at how and where we get our money, almost 60% of our total general fund comes from taxes. And then 22% is coming from those services. And that would be the charges for services. That includes impact fees as well, which is related again to development. So looking at the tax revenue, if you look at utility tax, we're at 2.6 million for 21. Sales tax 5.5 million, and then property tax 3.5 million. So the split is a little bit different. We used to be at almost a perfect 30-30-30 split. And now we're at 22% utility tax, 30% property tax, and then sales tax of 47%. That utility tax decrease does have to do with the decrease in utility tax that council approved from going from 22% down to 12%. And then this shows the sales tax. There's different ways to look at your sales tax revenue. Our accounting world, we report on an accrual basis with our financial statements, which is when revenues are incurred versus when we receive it. Cash basis is when you physically receive it. So this just gives you kind of a perspective. There's a 2-month lag on sales tax. So the cash basis that we received between January and December of 21 is 5 million, but the accrual basis is 5 million. So it's pretty close, but not exact. And then this just shows you month over month what we were collecting in sales tax in comparison to the previous years. Obviously, the far right column is 21, and it's significantly higher than previous years.
Why did we have such a bump, do you think, in October? Because that's a 2-month lag, right?
That October was vehicles. Believe it or not.
Vehicles.
It was we received 136,000 from that just alone that month.
Wow.
We usually, as a perspective, we usually receive about 22,000.
So those were ones that were bought in August.
Mhm. maybe some equipment.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I don't get the details of that, but that was what that huge bump was then. It was an interesting time for it to have happened, but it was that specific line item that it was. And then this gives a perspective. We had total gross receipts estimated at $591 million within the city of Battleground. The state received $38.4 million from the sales tax collected within the city. Transit 4.1, the county 886,000. And then for criminal and mental health, they each get a 0.1%, and that's 591,000 apiece. We do collect and get back a portion of the criminal tax. We received 464,000 in 21, so about 78.5% of that criminal justice comes back to us to support our police department. And this is what I was talking about related to how or what makes up our sales tax. So the 44.7%, that piece of the pie is retail. The 18.1%, the little, don't know what color you would call that, burgundy, is construction. And then there's the remaining ones. Food services has actually gone up at the same rate as retail. It went up 18% as well, which is also kind of surprising. Again, I thought that I thought that food was going to go down with COVID. It actually increased. I think the DoorDashes of the world and the deliveries and the takeouts just continued. So moving on, or before I move on to general fund expenses, or any questions about the revenues? Okay. So these are different general fund departments. I'll go through them. Looking at our general fund expenses by object, so looking at the entire general fund as a whole, all the different departments together, we were at $14.8 million for total expenditures in 21, which was 90% of the budget in comparison to 16 million in the previous year. A lot of that had to do with the CARES funding that we received last year, and we spent more than we did in 21. Training and travel was less than anticipated this year, specifically due to COVID restrictions. Community relations, the newsletter cost less than what we had anticipated. And then the parks plan started later in the year than we had anticipated. Legal services were not needed at the level that we had budgeted for. Jail costs were significantly less than what we had budgeted for. And then we also had some vacant police officer positions, and as well as engineering tech, which resulted in significant salary and benefit savings. And then in addition, we also have the ATMS small city program that we're doing jointly with Camas and Washougal that did not start in 2021. It will start in 22. So that budget line item did not get expended. So that's why we're so far under budget. And then looking at our general fund expenditures across the departments, this just gives you some perspective. All of the departments were within budget. And again, those line items that I went through are why some of those departments were under budget. Are there any questions about the general fund expenditures?
Would you go back to the previous slide, number 12? So if we budgeted 16.4, we spent 14.8, that leaves roughly $1.64 million. Where do I see it?
That was those line items I talked about. So that's related. Oh, do you mean?
Where do I see $1.64 million that we didn't spend?
It's in the general fund balance. So it sits. So so the surplus, the difference between the revenues and the expenditures that we get each year and spend each year, it sits in our general fund balance. And so a portion of that's restricted for, that's the 90 days restriction. And then the rest of it is surplus that's available for one-time uses or to cover shortfalls in future budget cycles. So the money doesn't go away. It sits and awaits to be appropriated by council through the budget process.
Which then brings me to when you, on the income side, you said roughly 17 million bucks is what we brought in.
19.
Right?
19.
19 million. And then we spent 14.8.
$4.6 million surplus in the general fund for 2021.
So we have our 90 days. The rest of it is shuttled off either to a savings, to the county fund or to whatever we're messing with over there, or it just sits.
Right, well, they're all, our policy is to make sure that we're always in at least the county.
They're
full
working.
LGAP, so it's earning money.
Yes.
And then we also have some long-term investments as well, but yes, it goes into savings and it sits until it's appropriated for use.
So I'm sure you have a slide coming up then that shows us where we were in 2020. We're roughly $5 million ahead. But well, I'll wait on that slide.
As I said, this has been an interesting 3 years between everything that's happened between the annexation and then COVID. And then it's an interesting dynamic that I did not foresee. So this just shows the real estate excise tax revenue where we're at 2021. As you can see, 2020 was high, but 2021 outdid 2020. Looking at the streets budget, the motor vehicle tax for both 2020 and 2021 was down from previous years. It continues to go down as folks get the electric cars, as folks continue to have fuel efficient vehicles, the tax and the fuel usage continues to go down. And I will point out for those that don't know that the fuel tax itself is not based upon what the city of Battleground residents use. It's based upon what comes into the state, and then a proportionate share gets shared with the cities at a rate set by the state. And so it doesn't matter what people use in the town versus not, we still get it based upon what's being purchased and coming into the state of Washington. But like I said, it's continued to go down. We only received 87% of what we had anticipated. And like I said, that has to do with a lot of different factors. We did have some concurrency mitigation, which for those that don't know, we collect funds for projects if the developer cannot, or if we're planning on doing the project later on down the road, they pay us a portion of the fee, and then those monies sit restricted to go towards that project when we start to do that project. And so it gets recognized as it gets used. And so that's what that portion was. And then we had obviously our transfer in from the general fund to cover the difference. That was the large transfer council had approved for the street preservation. As far as the expenditures, we expended 83% of the total budget. The street preservation work did come in under what was anticipated, which is a good thing. Those funds will be available for use this year. In addition, we did have some trouble getting seasonal staff just due to folks not applying and just a hard time getting folks in. So that was significantly lower than what we had anticipated as well. Are there any questions about the streets budget? Moving on to parks. So parks is up definitely from 2020. The community center revenue for the year, we collected 54,000 in comparison to 3,000 in 2020 because we were closed. So overall, it collected more than we expected. We were at 106% of budget. And then as far as expenditures, again, we were below what was anticipated. And a lot of that has to do with, we didn't have the additional janitorial for portion of the year because of the center not being open and not having to staff the center for rentals. Are there any questions about parks? Okay. Moving on to storm. We collected 113% of what we anticipated for the budget, and that has a large portion to do with, we received the state grant for the decant facility as well as the street sweeper. And so that was 309,000, which offset those expenditures, and we didn't have to use the fund balance in storm, which is great for the rates. As far as expenditures, we expended 93% of the budget. And again, a lot of that shortfall had to do with anticipating getting seasonals and not being able to get as many as we had hoped. Are there any questions about storm? Okay. Looking at water, this is a little bit when you look at the budget to actual here, we had expected to pay for the full freight on the treatment tanks for CPU, but Ridgefield jumped in and paid for a portion. So we had budgeted to cover those costs of 1.9 million and we didn't have to, which was great. So that 77% isn't a true reflection. If you look at the water services, we're at 109%. So we're on track with what our rate plan says. And then looking at our expenditures, we were at 74%. Again, a lot to do with those regional treatment tanks. Are there any questions about the water fund?
Have we, what dollar have we sent to the PUD? Do you know?
Including the treatment tanks or not including? the treatment
All
tanks?
in, because
1.7 million.
1.7 million for
The treatment tanks
Paradise,
and water. Mhm.
for Paradise Point.
We purchased water and then.
No, I'm not talking about purchased water. I'm talking about Paradise Point. I'm sorry.
592,000.
So they're holding 600 grand of our money.
They have put in the treatment plant, put in the treatment tanks. Those are what they're called, right? The treatment tanks for us to be able to receive those waters. And then that serves as a holder related to any future SDCs we have to pay to increase our connection. That makes sense. That was all in the agreement with CPU that was signed.
So Mark, I guess what it's stalled. As far as I can see, we've been messing with them now for roughly 6 years on Paradise Point. What do we have? We spent 600 grand. What do we have?
It essentially gives us the right to the 2,000 gallons per minute at the intertide.
So not the current 2,000 gallons, a future 2,000 gallons.
We have to upsize the transmission line, which is a 50/50 project, which will give us the additional 2 to get to 4,000.
So we've spent 600 grand for the right to pay retail dollar on the water they're sending us.
Correct.
Wow. We shouldn't go into the negotiation business. How does that work for us? I mean, what am I missing?
That gives us the well and then the treatment for it. So we didn't have to pay other than our share to build a brand new well and brand new treatment and then have to maintain that well and treatment, especially in an area where clearly we've seen it doesn't
Certainly.
work.
Yeah. No, I understand that. So 600 grand gets us 2,000 gallons a minute.
Correct.
And the rest of the money, which is how much at this point now to
I think
the transmission line?
The last estimate for transmission was 8 million, which 50% would be ours.
So $4 million gets us across the 10 miles from La Center to here and hooks into
It's actually a lot shorter. The line's built quite a bit. I don't remember the exact address, but it's pretty close to us.
It makes
So it's
us-
that last finish line.
It gets us connected.
Yeah.
And at that point, we go from two grand to how many gallons?
4,000.
To 4, so we double.
Yeah.
And we're still paying retail rate on that, even though we pay.
Yeah, unless something changes with the next agreement, it would still be the retail.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about water? And then looking at our sewer, we collected 115% of our budget to actual, or budget is what we expected. And a lot of that has to do with as we've had increasing within the city as people connect to our sewer and start paying those sewers. So the growth exceeded our expectations. And then our budget to actual for expenditures, we were at 84%. And that has to do with capital projects not getting farther along. Are there any questions about sewer? Okay. And then look,
Megan, can you tell
Yes.
me, what is our total sitting in the sewer budget right now? I mean, sitting in the sewer fund, do you know what our total?
cash balance
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
if you don't, just send it to me later.
I'll send it to you later.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry.
Nope, you are fine. I can actually. actually tell you that. Actually, no, I can't. I take that back because I don't have the detail in there. I will send that to everybody. It's quite a bit between the SDC fund and the operations fund.
We got quite a bit coming up.
Mhm.
But that's none of Uncle Sam's money sitting in that, right? The
No,
the
that's all.
2.9 is not sitting in that.
Correct. No, that's sitting in the general fund until those projects, and then it'll work just like a granting agency where then I'll transfer as those projects expend. I could take a guess, but I'm not going to. I will
No,
send that
that's
out. So in looking at our cash and investments, we have a total of $61.1 million across all accounts. And as far as the general fund, that's not.
17
I
million.
believe it's
17 mil
17 million.
ish.
Correct. So are there any questions about anything related to what we talked about today?
It's pretty obvious. I don't have an accounting degree, but could you just give me the number from what we're ahead from 21? A rough number.
Yes, sir, I can. I'm going to give you an actual number. We're ahead a total of 13.7 millions compared to 2020, and that's across all funds.
And as from what we budgeted to from what we spent to what we took in, I guess is what I'm asking. We're still ahead 13 some odd million.
As far as budget to actual across all funds, I would have to total that to get to there. But I can send that out as well.
I'll contact you during the week to try to figure this out because I don't want to take our time here. So does anyone else have any questions of Ms. Lowry? Welcome back, Ms. Urban. Good to see you. Don't see anyone. We're moving on, and I guess we'll go with Mr. Hersey. Sir.
And I have a consultant who's going to help with this one. So the Brian Chandler, who's the National Director for Transportation Safety at the consultant DKS, is going to present our local road safety plan. Brian, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mark. Good evening. Is my audio coming through okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
sir.
good.
All right, I'm assuming my screen is up, so I'm going to jump right in. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time this evening. Going to just quickly go through a process that we've gone through over the last several months with the city of Battleground and other cities in the area to develop a city safety plan and set you up for going after some safety-related grant funding with WashDOT's city safety program. So first, just to acknowledge kind of what we've been doing. RTC actually funded a big chunk of this plan by hiring us, DKS, and wanted to thank Mark in particular for his role in helping us develop a plan, review the drafts. He's been our primary point of contact through this process. So far, you can see we've also are doing plans at the same time with Camas, La Center, Ridgefield, and Washougal. I'm going to quickly go through the purpose and need of the plan, the development process that we went through, talk about safety grant application, and then our current status and where we're headed next. So the purpose of the plan, why would we even do this? What's the big deal here? The big deal here is that in Battleground, over the 5-year period that we studied from 2016 to 2020, one person was killed and 12 people were seriously injured in traffic crashes on Battleground city streets. And building a safety plan allows us to identify some of those safety needs, determine some potential solutions, and do the best we can to try to predict and then mitigate, reduce the opportunity for those crashes in the future. And the WashDOT City Safety Program this year requires a local road safety plan to apply for grant funding. So we went through a planning process to determine what the needs are and then identify a project to go after this grant funding with. There's a pretty formalized process that WashDOT requires us to go through. I'm not going to step through that today. You do have the entire local road safety plan in your packet. And so if you want to go through any of these detailed steps, if you have any questions, obviously feel free to either interrupt me or ask me at the end. But know that there's nothing new in this presentation. Everything in here is from the packet, the plan that you have in your packet. So we started by just looking at the base data. As mentioned, these are the fatal and serious injury collisions that have happened in the last few years. And the bottom graph just shows all reported collisions. So these are crashes that were reported by law enforcement in the city. You can see the number of fatal and serious injuries bounce around a little bit. They've kind of been up and down, as you can see. Those are very low numbers, so we don't tend to put a lot into the trend there because the numbers are so low. There is some randomness in crash data. The one on the bottom, we will sometimes put a trend line to. You can see it has actually trended down, which that's generally speaking, that has been true in 2020 because of COVID. Hearing the previous presentations and everything you have going on, you're going to have, I think, just increased volume, increased population in the coming years. And so I definitely think the proactive nature of safety, of doing what you can to make your overall system safe, will be really important too, as you continue to grow very quickly in the city. And there's just a quick map here. This is a heat map of all the reported crashes on the left side of your screen, and then the location of the fatal and serious injury crashes that occurred during the study period on the right side there. So we use the location. This does matter where previous crashes occurred. We have to be a little careful though, because crashes are relatively random, especially fatal and serious injury crashes. So we can't rely only on where crashes happened before and just assume they're going to happen there again in the next 5 years, because we know that that's not true. I've been doing this now for over 20 years, and we have really good evidence to show us that just looking at this map of fatal and serious injury crashes and saying, hey, what if we just go to those 9 locations? We'll never have anybody get hurt or killed. It doesn't tend to work that way. So we have to look at other things too. One of those things that we take a look at is what the citizens have to say. We really do care about the different topics they care about and also the locations of concern. Some of the topics of focus from the citizen surveys we did last summer were pedestrian safety, vehicle speeds, sight distance, and geometry. Sight distance is kind of this idea of you're at an intersection and you maybe have vegetation or something in the way where you can't see to get out very well. And then geometry can be everything from the roads are too narrow to maybe not having a turn lane when you may expect or want one. And you can see several locations there on the right side. And then we identified the most common contributors to the fatal and serious injury collisions in Battleground. And those were roadway departure, which is somebody running off the road, dark conditions, wet road surfaces, inattention or distraction, and then pedestrians or bicyclists involved in crashes, and then collisions happening at intersections. So we rolled that information, applied some of these most common contributors to the locations that have had crashes, and put those together to identify the locations of need. I'm not going to go through this list today. Again, this entire list is in your packet. This is a list of intersections we took a look at. This is then a list of corridors, so looking at non-intersection crashes. A lot of these will be those runoff road crashes that I mentioned a couple of slides ago. And then we rolled all this information up. So where did crashes happen? How severe were they? What types were they? Where we can, one thing that is predictable is how people tend to get hurt and killed in traffic crashes. And so looking at those types can matter a lot. And then we landed on several different treatments to consider for applying for safety program funding, and then maybe other funding sources too. I'll talk about those here at the very end. And one of those is systemic signalized intersections. The word systemic means we're not going to go to one location and spend $2 million. Instead, we found that we can get a lot of value by doing low-cost treatments at a larger number of locations. So we're looking at that both at signals, considering that at stop-controlled intersections as well. And then there are 2 specific locations. One is Northwest 20th Avenue at Northwest 9th Street. And then one is the corridor of Southwest 20th Avenue from Main Street to Eaton. And we're going to look at each of those 4 just really quick so you kind of get a feel for what we saw on those. The first one, this is the primary one, is systemic signalized intersection treatments. And so at each of the 5 city-owned traffic signals, we're looking at low-cost visibility upgrades, potential left turn modifications, and some pedestrian improvements. This can be everything from backplates on the signals to just double checking things like advanced warning signs, pavement marking. Just is everything kind of up to where it could be? Are there things that we could do with signal timing to make it better? And just and also ensuring that pedestrian crossings are kind of the best that they can be. So this is mostly a generally low cost. There might be some signal heads, but we're not putting in, this is not signal redesign. This is doing a little bit to make each of the 5 signalized intersections a little bit safer. The next one is similar, but now we're looking at stop controlled intersections. So we did identify 8 locations in the city where a lot of collisions that occur. Overall, this type of crash, unsignalized intersections, so mostly stop control locations, almost half of the crashes in the city occur at these locations, and almost half of fatal and serious injury crashes occur at stop locations. The typical treatments here are signing, pavement marking, some speed feedback signs. If you've ever had those that say your speed is 30 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. You can consider lighting in these situations if you have some dark crashes. You can see a graphic there on the left that you wouldn't do all of these things necessarily at any one location. This is just the menu of treatments that we consider depending on the need. Then a couple quick locations. This is one where we had 5 reported crashes at 20th and 9th. And of those 5, 2 of them involved a bicyclist, and one of those bicyclists was seriously injured. And so there's a couple of treatments we can look at here. Sorry for the acronym. RFB means rectangular rapid flashing beacon. If you look on the bottom right, it might be a little hard to see because it's not lit up, but these are rapid flashers that are on some pedestrian crossing signs. You may have some of these near your schools. Then another one to think about is a compact roundabout or a mini roundabout to try to calm traffic at this location. The last one is the 20th Avenue corridor. This one, there were several crashes at this location, including 3 pedestrian involved and 1 bicycle involved crash. Treatments we're looking at here include adding sidewalk where it's missing, potentially a multi-use path, unsignalized pedestrian crossing. You can see here making improvements to that, enhancing that, and then potential sign upgrades on this corridor. Then just a quick update on where we're at and where we're headed. We're finalizing the grant application right now. That's something Mark and I will be working on this week and early next week to finish up. The grant application, which includes the local road safety plan you have in your packet, it's kind of a big appendix, will be something that we submit by the end of next week. It's due on March the 4th to WashDOT local programs. And then they'll review that through the spring and summer, and sometime in summer or early fall, usually WashDOT will review and then make decisions on the grants that are approved. And then kind of going into the fall and beyond, I would encourage you all to just identify other needs. There'll be some things in the plan that maybe didn't end up as grant applications. There'll be some applications that we maybe don't receive funding for. And then there's other types of grants. There's safe routes to school grants. There's pedestrian bicycle grants through WashDOT. TIB, there's some grants through the NPO that I'm sure you all have participated in before. So there's a lot of opportunity these days. And then coming up is the gigantic federal grants that a lot of that money is going to be earmarked for local safety efforts. And then with any good planning study, you're always looking at the next plan. And this is a particular plan that needs to be updated every 2 years. So we started this project in summer 21. And we'll likely be wanting to restart it in summer 23 to get ready for the spring or winter 2024 city safety program grant cycle that'll come back again. And with that, may open if Mark, if you had anything to add, and then more than happy to take any questions.
No, I think we can go right to questions.
Okey doke, and we'll go right to Mr.
Mr. Mayor. All right. The one slide that we didn't have on here that was in our packet, Chief, I told you I was coming back to you. So this is on page 11, Council, if you're looking for it, which is page 186 of your packet, 11 and 12. So I know that this is more for streets, how we build our streets, do those type of things. But from the collision statistics there, that we have out of 554 citywide collisions, we see and when you're looking at your enforcement this summer or whenever you're doing it, chief, 5% of those were exceeding reasonable safe speed or exceeding state speed limits. 5% of those were alcohol impaired, which is 26 collisions on the first one, 30 on the second, 2 drug impaired, 170 inattention and distraction. So, and then if you go down to the next page and you look at the age 16 to 25, 303 of the 554 were 16 to 25-year-olds. I know Mr. McCoy does insurance, and I'm pretty sure that that's probably standard, but that's about normal, that 16 to 25-year-olds but I would be willing to say that inattention is probably a lot of that group too. And so as we're looking at these things, and we're looking at pedestrian, we've had some pedestrian issues where pedestrians have been hit. I've never seen it in the United States. I saw a cool one on TV where they did 3D crosswalks, and it freaks you out. Makes you you think there's like blocks sticking up when pedestrians walk across, like a 3D thing but looking at some of that stuff, but it goes hand in hand with what we were talking about earlier. If we have enforcement and we're doing things to enforce those type of things, and we look at our speed limits, I know we adjusted our speed limits on 20th, 5 or 6 years ago. But I think that's something that we need to possibly look at overall. And Mark, we depend on you to tell us, hey, I know all of us on council here, there's 7 of us, and there would be 8 opinions on the speeds on 502, 503, right? And what those speeds look like. But if you look at the statistics, our accidents, I mean, we're having collisions there, but our injury accidents and fatalities were in different areas than that. But, I think it's a good presentation. I like the data that's here to be able to look at. Some of it I don't understand, but that's why you're here, is to understand that stuff. But I think that there's a lot of things that council has brought up in the past. I know Mr. McCoy is hot on a sidewalk down on 20th, and it came out in this study. So I appreciate the study. Hopefully we can start to do some stuff. I know at certain times of the day in town, and I'm sure if we looked, some of this is due to not just inattention, but frustrated drivers. And so I can't tell you how many times I've sat at Parkway, right out here, Parkway in Maine, at a stoplight that has a line of traffic, and some guy goes, man, I can make that gap, right? And it's right when school's getting out, you got someone trying to cross the street at the same time that they're trying to make that gap. And it doesn't, just because we haven't had an accident there, but I think it's good information. I don't know what the overall cost is. It's millions and millions and millions to do some of this stuff. But I think that's one of the things that we talked about when we annexed into the fire district. This goes along with our public safety that we talked about. How are we making it better for the community? I'm not a big fan of roundabouts, but they seem to be putting them up everywhere. And I'm not as much a fan. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of roundabouts. I'm not a fan of people that don't know how to drive through roundabouts. That's what I'm not a fan of. But great. I like what you guys have. It'll be interesting to see what direction we go and what you're asking of us, and where we can start working on some of this stuff. And then with, police and stuff working together, I think we can hopefully reduce some of this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just one quick response on the speed thing. And I think there's maybe some officers in the room. Identifying this is really hard. You've got to have somebody. Officers are never there, or hardly ever there, when a crash occurs, right? They're coming after the fact. And so someone, either a witness or the driver themselves, need to admit they're speeding for this to be marked on the crash report. So this is historically highly underreported. And so, yeah, as I mentioned before, this is only showing the 554 crashes that actually have a crash report. of those crash reports, there's a lot of information that just can't be captured in the way that we might assume because we watch CSI or something, right? But we don't have that kind of information. So we do the best with what we have. The officers obviously do the best with all of their pressures that they have. And sometimes, so just wanted to make that note that it doesn't necessarily mean, in my opinion, that attention distraction is necessarily 50 times more important than, or whatever, 8 times more important than speed. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It's extremely important as well. It's just to kind of keep, there's a balance there. Sometimes, as you mentioned, some of this data can be confusing. Some of it is because the data is not great sometimes, right? And we're dealing with data the best that we can, and we're all doing the best we can with what we have.
Ms. Walters.
I just have a question for Mr. Herseg. I had asked a couple months ago about that intersection at Southwest 15th and Main Street, and I hadn't got a response back. And I was just wondering if you had had a chance to take a look at that and see if the signal could be changed or if it was necessary or.
Yeah, I've got all the data pulled. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I'll look at it. And then if I see something, I'll forward that on to WashDOT.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McCoy, sir.
Yeah, I was just curious on the timing as far as applying for those grants. And if a grant was awarded, how quickly would we be turning soil?
So there's 2 grants we're looking at. The city safety grant is due March 4th, I believe. I believe WashDOT will make a decision later in the year, and it looks like we have that up there. This particular grant is federal, so there's a lot more process that you have to go through to get to turning the dirt. I think best case, you would be late 2023, probably early 2024 with all of those requirements. The 20th Avenue falls under the Ped Bike one, which is actually a state program. That should be in, if it matches the timeline of 2020s, it was in July that the applications were due. That one would be a little bit faster. It's later in the season that you apply for it, but because it's state-only paperwork, it can go a little bit faster. So I think, again, it would be probably best case late 2023, but 2024 is probably when all those projects would start if we get funded.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mark, just one quick question. I noticed on the report, they talked about backing plates. I really can't imagine that I assume they're probably 18 by 30 or whatever the plate size is. Can't be that much. And I sometimes coming to the east or coming to the west, you have a hard time seeing the lights. So if we do have some city, the 5 city lights, I can see us probably taking care of that. Do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of low cost ones in this. So if we aren't awarded a grant, it's something we can cover with city funds.
But I assume that just the rectangular metal plates can't be.
Yeah, I haven't priced one, but
I
I don't think they're super
I'm
expensive.
sure we could probably buy them, the 7 of us, for probably 45, and the city could get a deal at about 145. So I'm sure we can find the money in there somewhere. Does anyone else have any questions of Mr. Chandler or Mr. Hersey? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Chandler. It was a pleasure to have you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Take care.
We're moving on to, there she is. Administrative reports, Ms. Erdman.
Yeah, we have a couple of administrative reports from Mr. Crummett and Community Development Director.
Good evening, Council. First item is the Hugo annexation that we discussed on February 7th, our last council meeting. They would like to ask and see if they could change the date to discuss this with you from March 21st to March 7th, and that works for staff, but we'd like your request to do that. So from March 21st to March 7th.
I don't see anyone disagree.
So not to be difficult, but because the statute requires council to set the date if we
That
can
could be
get
a
formal
problem.
consensus. If, I think you can take an oral vote. We just need to make a formal motion to amend it to. the March
And that does, before you do that, that we had to make a, didn't we set a date that we would talk about this? And are we, by moving that up 2 weeks, are we outside of whatever parameter that would be?
We're still within the 60-day requirement.
Yeah, it has to happen within 60 days, so it
Okay.
can happen sooner, not later. We just need council to make a formal motion to amend the date to the 7th.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Just real quickly on that one, we had also talked about discussing island annexations and we had set that as the same date. Would you like to move that up or would you like to keep that on the 21st?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand
The
you.
island annexations that we talked about.
Was that the first in March or
We were
the,
going to do it the second.
We were going to do it at the same time.
oh, I don't, what does that look like? What's the calendar on that day?
I just closed it. Let me see.
Thank you.
25.
If I'm-
March 7th. We've got 3 other presentations on that night, or the island annexation is the only thing on the 21st so far.
Why don't we just leave it on the 21st?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, moving on, the second request is to enter into a developer agreement termination. In 2015, the city entered into a development agreement with Trail Tech for their expansion to the west. That project never materialized, so now there's another totally different interested developer. They're looking at that site. As they did their title research, they discovered this developer agreement that they would like to terminate. The substance of that agreement was the city agreed to waive development review fees and traffic impact fees. And kind of the benefit for the city was that Trail Tech expected 60 new jobs out of this. So that was kind of the substance of it. But now that that's no longer in play, the developer's attorney would like to get that off of the title. And given that the city is a party to this agreement, we need you to request us to proceed with that. Then we'd bring that before you with legal review and formally terminate it at a future vote.
And you've spoken to Trail Tech and they have no interest anymore. I understand it's 7 years, but
I haven't spoken with Trail Tech.
so
So we have a new developer who's gone through a pre-application meeting and has 2 industrial buildings that are proposed on that site. So
I may be able to clarify that. So I don't know that the city's talked directly with Trail Tech. Steve Hornstein is representing the developer. In order to terminate the development agreement, it would have to be signed off on by the same parties that entered into the original agreement. So my understanding is Mr. Hornstein is communicating with the parties that would have been Trail Tech, and they will have to sign off on this as well.
that
So
was
it's
my
not going to
question.
be,
It wasn't a handshake deal that all of a sudden we're saying, hey, yeah, no.
they would
So-
have to be parties to the termination as well.
Okay, so you're just looking for our side, the authorization to disband this agreement.
correct, to proceed with that process.
You need a motion?
We would need a formal motion because it's to vacate a development agreement that was entered into on legislative authority.
But just for tonight, you just need consensus because you're going to bring that back, correct?
Correct.
Yes, so just consensus. tonight.
Okay. So does anyone have any disagreements with doing this? Seeing none, so I'll assume that the 7 of us agree that we can move forward with that. Is that what you need?
Yeah, that's what I.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Okay,
didn't know if he needs.
cool.
Yes.
Okie dokie. Anything else?
Should
Nothing for
conclude
me.
administrative reports.
Thank you. Council communications. I do have one, Ms. Erdman. Ms. Lowry mentioned 3 times in her presentation the lack of seasonal staff in 2021. It is February 22nd. Where do we stand on seasonal staff? Because as crazy as it sounds, as I go to places, people are asking 62-year-old men, if you're not doing anything, can you come work with us? Well, if they want me, I can't imagine that things are that good for everyone, but where do we stand?
We haven't started recruiting for this year yet. I believe we will start with some of the public works seasonals as early as March. We also have the seasonal playground workers that we will be recruiting for as well. So, it's kind of up in the air. We haven't had the best of luck. I'm hoping we have increased the salary. We did a little bit last year to be a little bit more competitive in the market to try to get more people to apply. But we shall see. I think we'll get that started in March.
Okie dokie. And do you know roughly how many you're looking for, roughly?
Mark, was it around 20 for the public works side?
Yeah, I think it's 18 for public works, and then I'm not sure about parks.
Yeah, Parks and Rec we did get the SEAT grant, so we'll be looking to hire a lead for that program. And then I believe it's 4 or 5 seasonals.
And 18 and older?
Correct.
Even parks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if any of us know 18 and olders who aren't doing anything this summer and want to make $1 or $2, we can check in with the city. And before we go, Ms. Gilberti, I see you on the line. If you would turn your camera on, please, ma'am. If you'd like, or just turn your microphone on if you'd like.
How about that?
That'll be grand. That'll be grand. I thought about that after I said it.
I like to stay behind the curtain.
Yes. Ms. Gilberti, let me just say that 10 years ago when Mr. Cortez and Mr. Bowman and myself walked into this building, you were one of the first employees that we met. And you probably looked at the three of us and thought, oh, great, Mo, Larry, and Curly. But let me, speaking on my behalf, and I'll let the other two speak on theirs. On my behalf, I will say that in this building over the years, I haven't found a person who has been more helpful and more kind to me than you have been. You have taken the time to explain some things that I didn't quite wrap my head around, and you did me the favor of, in various things, making me sound a whole lot smarter than I am. And then as I read things that I've written, I didn't realize I owned such vocabulary. And so let me just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much on my behalf for what you've done for me over the last 10 years. And before I turn it over to Mr. Bowman and Mr. Cortez, I will say that tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock at the community center, Ms. Camera, I don't know that there'll be 4 of us there because of work schedules, but I assume we're covered. I would think, Ms. Gilberti, there'll be 3 of us tomorrow there, and or if 4 of us show, one of us will step out the door. But I look forward to tomorrow and seeing you. And is Frank coming?
Yes, sir.
Well, I look forward to seeing Frank again. So, Mr. Cortez, Mr. Bowman, please, sirs.
Yes, Bonnie, you've been gracious, you've been kind, you're one of a kind. I'm so thankful to be able to have known you, and so thankful to have been able to serve while you've been here at the city. And I wish you the very, very best in your retirement years. And while I look forward to Alicia serving in that role, she certainly has big, enormous shoes to fill. And you will be missed very, very much. So thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you so much for the kind words. It's been a pleasure to serve the city council and staff and the citizens of Battleground. Thank you.
I guess I get to go last, Bonnie.
Oh,
I guess there could be more that jump in. I don't care. But most of you don't know that when I was mayor, Bonnie took over my whole calendar because I was horrible at that, and she got tired of calling me. So I gave her my access to my calendar so that she could set up all my stuff and kept me on task. And so we had a great relationship. I appreciate that time. I appreciate you helping us as council members to make our life a little bit easier. I know that's not easy for any of our staff to deal with electeds that maybe have egos or agendas or things they want to do that don't fit within that box. But you always, I'm sure there were many nights that you thought, gosh, I can't believe these idiots are running the city. But you did a good job of helping us and trying to point us in the right direction. And I do, just like the mayor and former mayor, wish you all the best in your retirement. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you take some time to go do the things that we wish we could right now, and you deserve it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Ms. Walters, I'm sorry, I didn't
Nope.
see that. I wasn't paying attention. What
Nope,
what
that was
brings
from
you?
last time.
Pardon?
That was from last time.
Oh, well, there we go. See, it ain't easy getting old. Okay, folks, next meeting, which will be our last mask meeting, if we can believe the governor. So our last mask meeting will be on Monday, March 7th. Is there a 6 o'clock meeting? I believe there is. Yes, from my left, they tell me yes. So we'll meet here at 6 o'clock and start with a study session, and then, of course, roll into 7 o'clock. So have a great couple of weeks, and I'll see you on the 7th.